5 days was all it took, and that was the part people struggled to believe. Before the story unfolds, pause for a moment, comment where you are watching from, and subscribe to the channel, because this journey challenges what most people think they know about love, culture, and family. Aisha Rahman had arrived in Cebu for a short consultancy project, confident, observant, and emotionally guarded after years of careful choices. She did not believe in rushed decisions, especially marriage. Yet something shifted almost immediately after meeting Daniel Reyes, a Filipino software analyst whose quiet confidence contrasted sharply with louder men she had known. Their first conversation was ordinary, even forgettable, but the days that followed were not. Aisha noticed how Daniel spoke about responsibility without sounding rehearsed, how he mentioned his parents without embarrassment, and how his values surfaced naturally rather than strategically. By the second day, curiosity replaced caution. By the third, admiration replaced curiosity. Friends warned her, reminding her of distance, religion, family expectations, and time. Still, Aisha stayed. What happened during those 5 days did not feel accidental, dramatic, or impulsive. It felt deliberate, revealing, and unsettling in the best way. And by the 5th morning, a decision had quietly formed, irreversible and calm. Daniel Reyes was not extraordinary in the way movies define extraordinary men. He was not wealthy, loud, or desperate to impress. He carried himself with restraint shaped by years of watching rather than performing. Raised in a modest household in Iloilo, Daniel grew up observing his father wake before dawn and his mother closer shop long after sunset. Responsibility was never announced, it was modeled. When Daniel spoke, he listened first, and Aisha noticed that immediately. During casual meals, he asked thoughtful questions without probing, offering stories only when relevant. There was no rush to charm her, no urgency to define what they were becoming. That restraint intrigued Aisha more than confidence ever could. She came from Kuala Lumpur, from a world where ambition often replaced presence. Men there promised futures. Daniel embodied one without announcing it. On the second evening, he mentioned visiting his parents that weekend. It was not an invitation, just information. Aisha asked if she could join, surprising herself more than him. Daniel paused, then smiled, not from excitement, but respect. He said yes without conditions. That pause mattered. It told Aisha this was not a performance arranged for approval. It was simply his life, unchanged by her presence. And that honesty unsettled her expectations more than any romantic gesture could have. The visit to Daniel's parents did not begin with speeches or rituals. It began with silence, observation, and subtle exchanges that revealed far more than words. Aisha noticed how Daniel greeted his parents with warmth without exaggeration, respect without submission. His father, Ramon Reyes, did not boast about his son's achievements. His mother, Lorna, did not interrogate Aisha's intentions. Instead, they treated her like someone already trusted, which felt deliberate, not careless. Conversations flowed naturally, grounded in daily life, shared responsibilities, and quiet humor. Aisha watched how Daniel stood when his mother moved, how he cleared plates without being asked, how his father spoke to his wife with calm partnership rather than authority. No one announced values, yet they were everywhere. There was no tension, no performance anxiety, no need to impress. Aisha realized she was witnessing the result of decades of consistent parenting, not a temporary display. Daniel was not trying to be a good man. He had been raised to be one. That distinction mattered deeply. By the end of that day, Aisha felt something unfamiliar, not attraction or excitement, but safety. It was not the absence of risk, but the presence of structure, accountability, and emotional steadiness. That feeling stayed with her through the night. Aisha had always believed she understood family values. Her upbringing emphasized respect, discipline, and independence. Yet what she witnessed in Daniel's home reframed those concepts. This family did not talk about sacrifice as a burden. It was woven into routine. Daniel's parents spoke openly about mistakes, finances, and fear without dramatizing them. There was no myth of perfection, only effort. When Daniel's father discussed past failures, he did so without shame, teaching accountability rather than pride. His mother spoke about marriage not as romance but as partnership shaped by patience and compromise. Aisha listened more than she spoke, absorbing patterns she had rarely seen expressed so calmly. That night, Daniel asked her what she thought. She answered honestly, saying she felt unexpectedly grounded. Daniel did not respond with excitement or relief. He nodded, acknowledging rather than claiming the moment. That restraint again. Later, alone with her thoughts, Aisha realized her hesitation about marriage had never been about commitment. It had been about uncertainty. She feared instability, unresolved trauma, and inherited chaos. In Daniel's family, she saw the opposite. Emotional literacy passed quietly across generations. This was not about cultural difference or romance. It was about predictability, values, and long-term emotional safety. For the first time, marriage felt less like a risk and more like alignment. By the fourth day, the pressure of time became unavoidable. Aisha's return flight loomed, and friends back home expected updates filled with skepticism. She had not planned for emotional clarity to arrive so quickly. Yet clarity does not ask permission. It arrives when patterns make sense. Aisha noticed how Daniel handled small disagreements, how he accepted feedback without defensiveness, how he spoke about the future without escapism. He did not promise luxury, relocation, or dramatic change. He spoke about shared responsibility, growth, and effort. That grounded honesty carried weight. They discussed faith openly, not as a conflict, but as a conversation requiring respect and learning. Daniel did not rush to agree, nor did he dismiss her beliefs. He listened, asked questions, and acknowledged differences without minimizing them. That emotional maturity felt rare. Aisha thought about her own parents, their unspoken frustrations, and the lessons she had internalized from watching them endure rather than resolve. In Daniel's family, conflict was addressed, not buried. That difference felt decisive. On the fourth night, she realized the question was no longer whether she loved Daniel. It was whether she trusted the environment that shaped him. The answer had already formed. She slept peacefully, not from exhaustion, but from resolution finally settling in. The fifth day began without ceremony. There were no dramatic declarations or public moments. Aisha and Daniel spoke privately, calmly, and without pressure. She asked direct questions about expectations, boundaries, and long-term goals. Daniel answered with honesty, not certainty. He acknowledged fear, growth, and responsibility. That transparency mattered more than confidence. Aisha then shared her decision without theatrics. She said she was willing to marry him, not because of timing, romance, or circumstance, but because she trusted the values that raised him. Daniel did not celebrate immediately. He asked if she was sure, not once, but twice. That hesitation confirmed everything. He respected the weight of the decision. When he finally accepted, it felt mutual, grounded, and sober. There was no sense of conquest or urgency. Word spread quickly, and reactions followed predictably. Shock, disbelief, concern, and admiration. Some called it reckless. Others called it fate. Aisha remained unmoved by opinions. She knew this decision was not impulsive. It was informed by observation, reflection, and emotional alignment. 5 days had revealed what years sometimes do not. People can perform affection, ambition, and confidence. Few can perform consistent values shaped by intentional parenting. Aisha chose the environment, not just the man. That distinction defined everything that followed. Returning to Malaysia did not weaken Aisha's conviction, it tested it. Family meetings followed, filled with careful questions and cultural concerns. Her parents worried about distance, religion, and sustainability. Aisha listened respectfully, answering without defensiveness. She spoke not about romance, but about stability, character, and upbringing. She described Daniel's parents, their partnership, and the emotional discipline they modeled. That perspective surprised her family. They expected infatuation, not analysis. Over time, skepticism softened into curiosity. Daniel traveled to Kuala Lumpur weeks later, not to impress, but to introduce himself honestly. He answered questions directly, acknowledged limitations, and showed respect without submission. Aisha's parents noticed how he listened more than he spoke. That mattered. Conversations shifted from resistance to logistics. A future slowly took shape. Aisha understood that marriage was not the end of evaluation. It was the beginning of accountability. She did not idealize Daniel or his family. She simply trusted the system that shaped him. Friends continued to question the speed, but Aisha no longer felt the need to justify herself. Speed had nothing to do with it. Some decisions take years because clarity never arrives. Others take days because alignment is immediate. Her story challenged timelines, not commitment. And as plans moved forward, one truth remained constant. The foundation mattered more than the duration. She had chosen deliberately, not desperately. As preparations unfolded, Aisha spent more time reflecting on the moment that changed everything. It was not a grand gesture or emotional confession. It was watching Daniel's father apologize to his mother during a quiet conversation, without ego or defensiveness. That moment revealed a legacy no resume could capture. Aisha realized she was marrying into a lineage of accountability, not perfection. Daniel did not come from wealth or prestige, but from emotional consistency. That mattered profoundly. During long-distance calls, Daniel remained steady, never possessive, never distant. He communicated openly, respected boundaries, and remained present. Aisha compared this to past relationships defined by intensity but lacking structure. Those relationships burned quickly and collapsed silently. This felt different. It was quieter, slower, and far more resilient. Cultural differences emerged, but they were addressed, not avoided. Daniel's parents welcomed Aisha without expectations to change herself. They emphasized integration, not erasure. That acceptance reinforced her decision. Marriage discussions became practical, focused on roles, responsibilities, and shared goals. There was no illusion that love alone would sustain them. They planned for conflict, compromise, and growth. That realism strengthened their bond. Aisha realized that her choice was less about destiny and more about discernment. 5 days revealed patterns others ignore for years. The outcome was not dramatic. It was stable. And stability, she learned, is often the most radical choice. When the wedding day arrived, it carried none of the chaos Aisha once feared. It was modest, intentional, and deeply symbolic. Families blended traditions with respect, not competition. Daniel's parents did not dominate the process. They supported quietly, allowing the couple to lead. That restraint echoed their parenting style. Aisha noticed how Daniel handled pressure, logistics, and emotion with the same steadiness she had observed from the beginning. Nothing felt forced. Nothing felt rushed. The 5-day story still circulated among guests, whispered with fascination. Yet standing there, Aisha understood how misleading timelines could be. The decision had been quick, but the foundation had existed long before they met. It was built by parents who chose consistency over control, dialogue over dominance, and humility over pride. Aisha did not feel like she was entering uncertainty. She felt like she was joining a structure already tested by time. That realization brought calm, not excitement. And calm felt right. As vows were exchanged, there was no sense of surrender or loss. There was partnership, clarity, and mutual accountability. 5 days had opened the door, but intention carried them forward. Aisha smiled, not because she felt lucky, but because she felt prepared. That distinction defined everything. Months after the wedding, reality settled in as expected. Marriage revealed habits, flaws, and differences that no courtship could hide. Yet the same values Aisha observed in Daniel's upbringing continued to surface. Conflict was addressed early. Silence was not weaponized. Responsibility was shared. Daniel did not default to defensiveness, nor did Aisha retreat into avoidance. They had disagreements, sometimes intense, but never destructive. Aisha often reflected on the 5-day decision, not with doubt, but appreciation. Those days stripped away illusion and forced attention to fundamentals. Friends who once questioned her now asked questions themselves. They wanted to know what she saw, what she felt, what changed her mind. Aisha always gave the same answer. She did not fall in love with speed. She recognized emotional structure. That recognition mattered more than chemistry. Daniel's parents remained present without intrusion, offering support without control. Their marriage continued to model partnership rather than performance. Aisha realized she had not just married a man. She had joined a system of values that reinforced growth. 5 days was never the headline. Parenting was. Consistent, intentional parenting shaped a man capable of partnership. That truth endured long after the story lost its novelty. And in that endurance, Aisha found certainty that time alone could never provide. As the story spread online, strangers debated its legitimacy. Some called it naive. Others called it inspiring. Few understood its core. Aisha read comments without emotion, recognizing projection when she saw it. Many people measured love by duration rather than discernment. They assumed time equaled wisdom. Aisha knew better. Time only reveals what already exists. In 5 days, she saw patterns that others ignore for years. She saw how Daniel's parents disagreed respectfully, how they corrected without humiliation, how they modeled accountability without control. Those lessons lived in Daniel's behavior effortlessly. That was not coincidence. It was design. Aisha began speaking privately to young women seeking advice. She did not encourage quick decisions. She encouraged intentional observation. Watch how a person handles responsibility. Watch how they speak about their parents. Watch how conflict is resolved. Romance can be performed. Values cannot. Daniel never claimed perfection. He claimed responsibility. That distinction sustained their marriage. Aisha's parents later admitted their respect grew not from persuasion, but consistency. Daniel remained the same man before and after marriage. That reliability validated Aisha's decision more than any milestone. 5 days sparked the journey. Parenting sustained it. The story was never about impulsiveness. It was about clarity arriving when people pay attention. And attention, Aisha learned, is the rarest form of commitment. Over time, Aisha noticed subtle changes within herself. She became more patient, less reactive, more grounded. Living within a framework of accountability reshaped her instincts. Daniel did not demand change, he modeled it. That modeling mirrored his upbringing. His parents had never forced obedience, they cultivated understanding. Aisha saw how that approach echoed through generations. When disagreements arose, Daniel sought resolution, not victory. That approach transformed conflict into collaboration. Aisha realized how often relationships fail not from lack of love, but from incompatible emotional training. People bring unexamined patterns into partnerships, then blame incompatibility. She had chosen differently. She had chosen alignment over attraction. That choice required humility. It required admitting that passion alone was insufficient. 5 days gave her the opportunity to observe without attachment clouding judgment. That timing was not magical. It was clarifying. Aisha often reflected on how close she came to dismissing the connection as unrealistic. Had she left earlier, she would have missed everything. The lesson stayed with her. Decisions deserve presence, not hesitation disguised as caution. When clarity arrives, it must be respected. Her story became less about romance and more about awareness. Daniel remained consistent, not because marriage changed him, but because his foundation never required performance. That stability, rare and undervalued, became the quiet strength of their life together. And Aisha never confused speed with recklessness again. Years later, the 5-day decision felt less extraordinary than people assumed. It became a reference point rather than a defining moment. Life introduced challenges no timeline could prevent. Career changes, family illness, cultural adjustments, and moments of doubt tested their resilience. Yet the same principles held. Communication remained open. Accountability remained shared. Daniel's parents aged gracefully, still modeling partnership through care and mutual respect. Aisha watched Daniel step into responsibility without resentment, echoing what he had learned decades earlier. That continuity reinforced her belief that parenting shapes futures quietly but decisively. She began advocating for intentional family culture, not as an expert, but as a witness. Her story resonated because it was not sensational. It was grounded. People wanted fairy tales. Aisha offered frameworks. She explained that love matures through structure, not spontaneity. 5 days revealed structure. Years confirmed it. The story lost its shock value but gained credibility. Those who once dismissed it began asking deeper questions. What should people look for? How can values be identified early? Aisha always answered simply. Observe consistency. Observe accountability. Observe how people treat those they do not need to impress. That advice applied beyond marriage. It shaped friendships, partnerships, and leadership. The 5-day decision became a lesson in discernment rather than speed. And in that reframing, Aisha found peace with how her story was remembered. It was never about time. It was about seeing clearly when it mattered most. Aisha's perspective on love evolved from idealism to realism without losing warmth. She learned that romance thrives best within stability, not uncertainty. Daniel never relied on charm to sustain connection. He relied on reliability. That reliability came from years of observing his parents navigate hardship without spectacle. Their influence remained subtle but powerful. Aisha noticed how Daniel approached parenting discussions with intentionality, already aware of the impact small behaviors create. He spoke about future children with responsibility rather than entitlement. That awareness reassured her deeply. She knew she had not married potential. She had married preparation. 5 days had simply uncovered it. Friends who once doubted her choice began sharing stories of long relationships built on fragile foundations. Aisha listened without judgment, recognizing how easy it is to confuse familiarity with compatibility. Her story offered an alternative perspective. Compatibility reveals itself through values, not time served. Daniel's upbringing created emotional fluency that many lacked despite years of dating. That fluency prevented escalation, miscommunication, and resentment. Aisha felt gratitude for the parents who raised him with intention rather than control. She often told Daniel this, and he always redirected credit to his parents. That humility further affirmed her choice. 5 days revealed humility. Years confirmed it. And that consistency transformed what could have been a risky decision into a sustainable partnership built on clarity, not chance. The cultural bridge between Malaysia and the Philippines required patience and learning from both sides. Traditions differed, expectations shifted, and misunderstandings arose. Yet the foundation of respect remained unshaken. Daniel never minimized Aisha's background. He sought understanding rather than assimilation. That openness mirrored how his parents had welcomed Aisha from the beginning. Inclusion, not absorption, defined their approach. Aisha felt seen rather than reshaped. That distinction mattered profoundly. It reinforced her belief that values transcend borders when they are practiced consistently. 5 days had shown her the core. Years allowed it to expand. As life progressed, the initial skepticism surrounding their union faded. Results replaced opinions. Stability replaced speculation. The story transformed from shock to reference. People stopped asking why so fast and started asking how it worked. Aisha answered honestly. It worked because the decision was not emotional alone. It was observational. She trusted patterns more than promises. Daniel trusted process more than impulse. That alignment sustained them through uncertainty. Parenting, she learned, is not about control but modeling. Daniel's parents modeled responsibility, humility, and partnership. Those lessons lived on. 5 days had simply illuminated them. And that illumination changed the trajectory of Aisha's life, not through drama, but through discernment that honored substance over spectacle. As their marriage matured, Aisha became more vocal about redefining success in relationships. She challenged the idea that longevity alone signifies health. She emphasized emotional literacy, accountability, and consistency. Her story gained attention not because of its speed, but because of its outcome. People related to the exhaustion of prolonged uncertainty. Aisha's clarity felt refreshing. She never framed her choice as superior. She framed it as intentional. That distinction invited dialogue rather than defensiveness. Daniel supported her quietly, never positioning himself as an example. He remained focused on daily responsibility. That humility reflected his upbringing more than any speech could. His parents continued living their values, never capitalizing on the story. They remained consistent, uninterested in validation. Aisha admired that deeply. It reminded her that true values seek continuity, not applause. 5 days had revealed that environment. Years allowed her to live within it. The lesson endured. Relationships thrive when foundations are visible early. People often ignore them, distracted by intensity.
Aisha chose differently.
She chose observation over assumption. That choice shaped her future. It shaped her peace. And it shaped how her story was ultimately understood. Not as impulsive, but as deliberate. Not as romantic fantasy, but as practical alignment. 5 days did not rush the truth. They revealed it. And truth, once seen clearly, rarely requires more time to be convincing. Looking back, Aisha recognized how rare it is to encounter clarity without resistance. Many people delay decisions, hoping certainty will increase with time. Often, it does not. Time only magnifies what already exists. In her case, 5 days concentrated observation, forcing attention to fundamentals. That intensity removed distraction. Daniel's consistency stood out precisely because there was no prolonged ambiguity. His behavior aligned with his words immediately. That alignment reduced doubt. Aisha learned to trust coherence over charisma. She saw how Daniel's parents cultivated emotional responsibility without rigidity. That balance shaped a man capable of partnership rather than dominance. Those traits did not emerge during courtship. They pre-existed it. 5 days simply confirmed them. As years passed, Aisha felt gratitude for the courage to decide when clarity appeared. Many fear judgment more than misalignment. She chose alignment. That choice required confidence in her discernment. It required listening to observation rather than noise. Her story became less about love and more about decision-making. People asked how to replicate it. Aisha always replied that replication was impossible. Discernment is personal, but principles are transferable. Observe behavior. Observe family dynamics. Observe accountability. Those indicators rarely lie. 5 days did not guarantee success. They revealed compatibility. That revelation made commitment reasonable, not reckless. And in that reasonableness, Aisha found lasting confidence. Daniel often reflected privately on the weight of his parents' influence. He understood that their quiet consistency shaped his marriage more than any advice he could offer. He honored that legacy through daily choices, not declarations. Aisha noticed how he corrected himself when wrong, how he remained present during stress, how he never outsourced emotional labor. Those behaviors sustained trust. Trust, she learned, grows from reliability, not intensity. 5 days had shown her reliability. Years proved it durable. Their partnership evolved through shared effort rather than romantic idealism. That realism did not diminish affection. It strengthened it. Aisha realized that choosing a partner also means choosing a future environment. She had chosen one grounded in accountability. That environment nurtured growth rather than fear. As they faced new phases of life, the foundation adapted without breaking. That adaptability traced directly back to parenting that encouraged dialogue over dominance. Daniel's parents never claimed credit. They simply continued living their values. Aisha found that humility profound. It reinforced her belief that impact does not require recognition. 5 days opened her eyes. A lifetime sustained the lesson. Her story became a reminder that the most important qualities in relationships are often visible early. People simply overlook them. Aisha did not. And that attentiveness defined her journey more than time ever could. As conversations about relationships continued evolving online, Aisha remained measured in sharing her experience. She resisted oversimplification. She emphasized that speed was not the lesson. Discernment was. 5 days worked because observation was intentional and distractions were minimal. Many relationships fail not from lack of time, but from lack of attention. Aisha encouraged people to observe patterns, not potential. Daniel's parents had demonstrated patterns over decades. Daniel embodied them naturally. That continuity mattered. Her decision did not eliminate uncertainty, it managed it responsibly. Marriage always involves risk. The difference lies in informed risk versus hopeful risk.
Aisha chose informed.
That choice reduced surprises without eliminating growth. Over time, her story shifted from viral curiosity to quiet reference. It became a case study in values-based decision-making. That reframing honored the truth. Daniel remained unchanged, consistent, accountable. Aisha remained grounded, observant, and intentional. Their partnership continued evolving through shared effort. 5 days became a footnote rather than a headline. The real story was parenting done well. That truth resonated across cultures, reminding people that love is not found in haste or delay, but in clarity. When clarity appears, courage must follow. Aisha's courage changed her life. Not because she rushed, but because she recognized substance when it stood clearly in front of her. In the end, Aisha's story endured because it challenged assumptions without preaching. It asked a simple question. What if the most important decisions are not about time, but attention? 5 days revealed what years often obscure. Daniel's upbringing shaped his character long before Aisha arrived. His parents built emotional infrastructure quietly, consistently, without seeking validation. That infrastructure supported a marriage formed quickly but sustained deliberately. Aisha did not romanticize the process. She respected it. She chose alignment over anticipation. That choice required courage, not recklessness. Her life reflected the outcome. Stability replaced doubt. Growth replaced fear. Partnership replaced performance. The story no longer belonged to headlines or comments. It belonged to lived experience. 5 days did not define her marriage. Values did. And those values proved durable across distance, culture, and time. Aisha never claimed certainty. She claimed discernment. That distinction mattered. Her journey reminded people that clarity does not always arrive gradually. Sometimes it arrives suddenly, demanding response. When it does, hesitation can be as risky as impulsiveness. The wisdom lies in recognizing the difference. Aisha recognized it. She acted. And years later, the decision remained sound. Not because it was fast, but because it was grounded. 5 days were enough to see what truly mattered.